Hello. We would like to discuss American War of Independence and its influence on British Romantic poetry. Uh, before we proceed, let us try to understand what American War of Independence is. America was a land which was newly discovered by Europeans. That doesn't mean the land didn't exist or people didn't know that it existed. But for Europeans, it was a new land which was discovered. Spanish were the earliest people to be there, but then British and French, so they expanded, they actually divided the North America among themselves, and they made America as their colony. So in a particular place which we call as States of America today, was also part of British colony, and that is what we are dealing with today. So there were 13 colonies. Now, of course, it is considered. I mean, now it is 50 states. But by then, it was 13 colonies. These 13 colonies were controlled by British monarchy by then, and they had their own rule which was set up there. And of course, the people who have lived in America, so after a couple of generations, they started claiming their own identity, and they said that we are different than Britain. Like we are Americans, we are not British. So with that, many other political, economical, and social reasons, they want to be independent, and they waged war against Britain, and so they declared themselves free. So this is the basic idea of American War of Independence. So to see why it happened. So how we need to understand how colonization works. So colonization, so that it is the colonial state. So what it does is let us take example of Britain. So Britain has colonies in multiple places. So they try to extract economical resources from these places and feed the mother state or the Britain in this place, and they become rich while they keep the colonies poor. So that is what happened to India as well. So this derivation of wealth is majorly done through taxation. Of course, taxation is a very important ways of earning wealth, and others were like restricting trade. So if India has a large export of something, so it can't trade it to any other countries than Britain. So automatically they India has to sell it for a very less cost, whatever British say, that is what they have to sell it to, and Britishers sell it to some other people for a large sum of money. So that is how colonies make, colonial masters make profit. So the same went for America as well. America was a very uh, a very rich land in terms of agriculture. So of course, how did they conduct agriculture? Through the slaves which they captured from Africa, South America, and rest of the world. So and so they had a large production of sugar and some other agricultural products, and they were not allowed to sell it to anybody else other than Britain. So, and of course it's a problem in terms of like so the wealth is being sucked out by the colonizers, and they said that we want to be independent, we don't want to be part of your colonization anymore. So one of the important events which took place was in 1773, called as Boston Tea Party. So what happened was like the just like exporting has to be done only through British, even importing is the same. Like so so the American colonies had to import, many of the things from outside, and a large sum of tax as well as heavy price was labeled on them. So one of those commodities happened to be tea, and the British ships had carried tea to the Boston harbor, and Americans, as a protest to their unfair laws, they disguised themselves, and they attacked the ships where the tea crates are kept, and they threw the tea crates to the sea as a sign of protest. And this particular incident is called as Boston Tea Party, one of the important events of American War of Independence. But the fun part, just a factoid. So the tea which was carried in those British ships did not actually belong to British. Those were the Indian tea which they had taken from India, and sold it to Americans. Just a factoid, not important issue. But that is how colonization works. And of course, Americans were against the colonization, and they had to fight it. And the political act of fighting the war is not really important for us, but one aspect of it which is very important is the involvement of French. The French and British were rivals. They were rivals for a very, very long time until Second World War. They fought many wars, and some of them spanned over a century as well. So French hated British, Americans hated British. So what happens? Naturally, French joined Americans in their fight against Britishers. In fact, this. So Statue of Liberty was gifted to Americans by French. So French were involved in this particular war, and they helped Americans to fight off British. So, and in fact, when the war ended, so the Treaty of Peace was signed in Paris, because France hosted the terms of negotiation and everything. So it was it is considered as Treaty of France. So why are we talking about American War of Independence and talking about romantic poetry? So this seems like, very unusual thing to speak about. Uh, well, there are, there are a couple of things which are important when we are talking about, romantic poetry. And of course, American War of Independence never had a direct impact on romantic poetry, but there are a couple of things. One, the kind of spirit that American War of Independence spread became very important, and the spirit of American War of Independence, some of the values it stood for, it spread around the world, and people started appreciating those values, and those values is one thing which we are going to speak about, and another is which is very, very interesting, because French were involved in American War of Independence. French Revolution took place. Because of the French Revolution, Romantic movement had a significant push, we can say. So regarding French Revolution, I have made a separate video. So you can read it in detail. You can listen to it in detail over there. But otherwise, I'm just going to touch up on it, and just bring out a couple of things which which can be spoken about the relationship between American War of Independence and romantic poetry. So, uh, one of the major thing which happened during American War of Independence was, so for the first time, uh, of course, it's not a first time, but historically speaking, a first major event where liberty and freedom were, used as a slogan against a tyrannical rule. As I've told you, there are many historical instances against this, but as a when we are thinking of modern political state, right? So this was the first time we can say. So this was before French Revolution or Italian reunification or any of these things. American War of Independence was fought, and that symbolized the idea of liberty and freedom, and fight against tyrannical rule. So, and this idea of liberty and freedom, as we have discussed before, was a significant part of Romantic movement. And many poets were, they carried this ideal of liberty and freedom. And that is one area where American War of Independence, had an impact on Romantic movement. Then, so the spirit of questioning the existing authority. So I mean, so British are the authority and Americans fought against them. And that is kind of a rebellious nature which was spread in Europe at later point of time. And that rebellion against a conventional structure. So that spirit can also be seen in Romantic poetry in terms of structure. So the writing structure, if you see, it is very different than what existed before. The closest literary movement to Romanticism is, metaphysical poetry. So writings of Romanticism is way different than metaphysical poetry, right? So that is one way the spirit of rebellion influenced Romantic movement. Then see, the people who went to America, the people who had seen America. So America was a very naturally, it's a natural wealth was quite preserved in America, we can say. So there was natural resources were abundant, and majority of America was unspoiled nature. It consists of unspoiled nature. So the people who went back to Europe, Britain or France, they spoke about it, and so they said that America was a symbol of this unspoiled environment, whereas Britain had started to get industrialized, and so urbanization was taking its initial steps. So so the beauty of nature, the it is, the term is pastoral ideal, like so an unspoiled nature is something to be protected. So this pastoral ideal is heart and soul of Romantic poetry. So Wordsworth, Coleridge, and other poets, but Wordsworth, majorly was his primary idea is that of a pastoral ideal, where, like so the nature has to be preserved. So so these are the some of the major ideas. Then there are some intellectual the intellectual thoughts which originated through American War of Independence. That is in terms of governance, individual right, and power, thoughts on power, and all these things. So they are not so important to discuss Romantic poetry, except for individuality and individual rights. So is a part of Romantic poetry. So best example, among the poems which you have read, Chimney Sweeper, like the poem Chimney Sweeper actually stands for the rights of children, right? So it is not a justification of, oh, this is how it is. No, it stands for the right. So that way Romantic poetry was focusing on individual rights, and it has some roots in American War of Independence. So this is the reason why American War of Independence is very important when we talk about Romantic poetry. And yeah, that is the basic idea. There isn't much to it to say that there was a direct impact. So there were no direct impact, because American War of Independence was purely a political movement. So it's a movement of changing a political structure in a state which is outside England, right? So it's not, it's not Britain. So, it did not have any direct impact on, romantic poetry as such. But these are the small things which mattered when, which mattered the eventual evolution of romantic poetry. So it is not one day some person has thought, oh, okay, so today I want to write some new form of poetry and wrote a romantic poetry. It is the eventual progression, starting from enlightenment movement to American War of Independence to French Revolution, and finally a romantic idea started becoming much more clear, and people started writing it. It is not one person just thinking out of the blue saying that I need to start something now one day. Of course, it was very well theorized by Wordsworth in his essay, in his preface to the book Lyrical Ballad. He clearly, writes, theorizes it, but it existed long before he theorized, because it was an eventual process rather than an immediate spontaneous decision. So that is why we need to understand it as an eventual progression, starting from Enlightenment, American War of Independence, French Revolution, and finally Romanticism. So, I hope you were able to understand it. I was hoping that it's clearly presented in front of you. Thank you very much.